I'm Kathy Woodard with Clemson University Public Service and Agriculture, and I'm here at the South Carolina Water Resources Conference in Columbia, South Carolina. I have with me doctoral candidate Lauren Garcia Chance, and she is a doctoral candidate in the field of environmental toxicology, and I'm going to ask her to explain to all of us what environmental toxicology is before we get started with our interview.
Well, that's a great question. So environmental toxicology is essentially the application of the medical field of toxicology, but to the environment. And so, we are often concerned about how contaminants can affect humans, but in recent years, like especially beginning in the 1960s, we became aware that while some contaminants may not harm humans, they can have implications in the environment and in our environmental structures. A great example is Rachel Carson and Silent Spring, in recognition that the chemical DDT, while it wasn't harmful to humans, it had really bad implications in terms of the deterioration of eggshells for birds. So this was kind of one of the first cases in which we really realized there's this separate environmental toxicology kind of concept that occurs in the environment.
Well, you were here giving a presentation related to a statewide survey that you did on use of water, water supply, with specialty crops. Can you tell us a little bit about your work on that?
So we identified that despite the fact that our doctoral research really focuses on remediating runoff from nurseries and trying to find solutions to things like nitrogen pollution, plant pathogens, herbicides and pesticides within that water, we didn't really have a characterization of the water that was being applied to these operations. And without that baseline of what is actually being applied for irrigation, it becomes difficult to understand where in the processes of the operations they're then introducing these contaminants. And by understanding that better, it helps us to then solve how to remove them from the system. So that being said, we decided that it would be best if we went out and we kind of did some groundwork and determined, especially within the state of South Carolina, where new policies and new changes within our regulations are going to be enacted within the next several years. How can we actually look at how much water is being applied, who is applying it, how are they applying it, and then what that water looks like?
So what were your preliminary findings on that?
We divided our growers into the 3 different major areas of South Carolina. So we had Piedmont, central, and coastal areas. And one of the great things that we found just looking at the preliminary survey findings was differences in the actual ways that these growers use water and apply that water. So for example, in the Upstate, we tend to find that they use a lot more drip irrigation, which happens to be very water use efficient. There's very little water that is actually left as runoff from those operations. Comparatively, we have a large number of overhead irrigators in the coastal area. And so those are growers that, if you think of your typical kind of a sprinkler system, they're applying a lot of water, there tends to be more runoff. But the really great outcome of that was that at the same time, while we were seeing that trend, we were also seeing a trend in the terms of reuse of that water. So while the Upstate growers do not tend to reuse their water, that's because they have very little runoff that's occurring to begin with. And so it's very hard for them to capture it and reuse it. Comparatively, the coastal growers with their overhead irrigation, they tend to reuse and recycle their water on a much larger scale, which makes sense because they're applying overhead irrigation that has a lot more runoff. And so that was a very hopeful finding. And furthermore, a lot of these growers are really engaged and they want to know how to best manage their water resources and manage their water quality. And so I think there's a really great opening for our policies here in South Carolina to integrate specialty crops growers into any new policies that are made, because they're definitely engaged and they're willing to help and be proactive in how they're handling these sources.
I know you've been active with the South Carolina Water Resources Center in some of the conferences in the past.
Yes.
So why is this particular conference important to you in your professional career path forward?
So I'm very excited about this conference in particular for several reasons. One is that I'll be graduating in May, and so coming here and networking and making connections is really a great opportunity for opening different paths for my future. But also for this Water Resources Conference, I was able to bring some of my undergraduate researchers with me. And so that's really exciting to see them engage in the sessions and learn and give them the opportunity to make connections and try and find their own way. And so both those combined together has been really fun for this conference.
Well, good. Well, that's been good for you. And what's your dissertation research in?
So my dissertation research focuses on the use of bioremediation methods, specifically using plants. I'm a plant nerd myself, and so I love working with plants and using those plants to remove excess nutrients from runoff, so from both agricultural production and urban runoff.
Well, thank you so much for giving us some of your time today and
Thank
for the work
you.
that you're doing, and good luck with the future.
Appreciate it.